Let the cultural appreciation continue. Alex on YouTube has requested this at least a couple times now, so I'm finally getting around to it. Pozole is a lovely and warm Mexican stew that's usually served around wintertime, and it's summertime here at the moment, but the fresh ingredients are arguably better right now, so it's still a good time to make it. It usually comes prepared in either rojo or verde, which means red or green. I've always been more partial for whatever reason to the verde in dishes like this, so that's what I'm going to make here. And I don't think I need to disclaim this just simply based on my skin color, but this is probably not going to be the most authentic or traditional recipe out there. This stew is typically served with chicken, so that's what I'm going to do today, and I think the best way to do that is with a whole chicken. The reason is because this relies heavily on the chicken stock that you use, so why not make your own? This might be the easiest stock you ever make, so it's well worth it. I'm going to take one of these frying chickens, which weighs 4 to 5 pounds, drain the juices and lay them flat on my cutting board. Now this is actually my first time deconstructing a whole chicken, so look elsewhere if you want real advice, but for funsies sakes, I'll show you what I did. I'm using one of these carving knives or boning knives, whatever they're called, because it's a little more flexible than a chef's knife. First, trimming away between the thigh and the body to separate the leg quarter. Just kind of run the knife until I run into a bone, and then you can kind of turn that and break it out. The only other thing holding it there is the skin, so you can just cut that away. I never really understood how people explained it when they were making videos about it, so I don't know how to make sense when I'm doing it. You just have to do it to feel it. The wings seem pretty similar. You just cut along the skin that connects them to the body. Those come out the easiest in my opinion. And then I went for the spine, which you should have a good pair of kitchen shears for this. Mine actually suck, so they made the job pretty hard, but you just cut along the sides of the spine next to the bone as close as you can get. I ended up having to use my knife to supplement, but we got there. Lastly, the hardest part to me is separating the breasts. There's ribs involved, and they're connected by the sternum or whatever the chest bone is that they have. I've seen people kind of press this to crack it down, but it didn't work for me, so I just manhandled the knife and tried to break it apart, and I eventually got there, but it was a lot of work. The breasts didn't come out even either. They had different types of bones hanging off of them, but I didn't really care because of what we're about to do with it. And that is put all this in a large pot. I'm using my Dutch oven, and then fill it with about 12 cups of water. I'm also adding a whole head of garlic that I've cut in half, and then a yellow onion that I've quartered. What we're doing here is utilizing the bones to make our own chicken stock from scratch while simultaneously cooking the chicken meat that we can use in the pozole. But if you're really partial to using store-bought chicken stock, you can do that. You can just use boneless, skinless chicken thighs and cook them the same way in the store-bought stock until they're tender. But regardless, I'm bringing this to a boil and then lowering it to a medium simmer. At that point, you'll see a lot of scum and bubbles rise to the top. I'm using a skimmer to get rid of all that. I'm just letting that simmer go until the meat is tender, and that took me about 45 minutes to an hour. While that meat is cooking, we can go ahead and make our salsa verde, which is going to bring all the fresh flavor to this pozole. I'm starting with 2 poblanos and 2 jalapeños. You could just add them in fresh, but what I'm going to do is char them up a bit to add a lot more flavor. So over the high open flame of my gas stove, I'm going to put the peppers and kind of turn them every few seconds until I get black charring around them. Be patient with this and make sure to turn it continuously to get even blackening. My jalapeños were too small to fool with. They kept falling through, so I just used my blowtorch to get those. But the whole process takes like 10 minutes, so just take your time. And once you have your
charred boys,
you immediately take those and get them under some plastic wrap so that they can steam. Let that go for 5 to 10 minutes to soften them up and make the skin easy to peel off. I just used the back of my knife to scrape off all that blackening that we got. Don't worry, the flavor is still inside of the pepper, so you're not going to miss anything. And once you got all that cancer off, you'll notice that these are a lot softer, but just take them and roughly chop them because we're going to add them to a blender in a minute. I decided to discard the ribs and seeds of the jalapeños just to take down the spice a bit. I kept the seeds from the poblanos because those aren't nearly as spicy, but in hindsight I would have just kept all of them because mine wasn't spicy enough. But moving on, I'm also going to roughly chop up another yellow onion, another 5 to 7 cloves of garlic, and then one of my favorite things on the planet, a pound of tomatillos. This is what makes me love the flavor of salsa verde so much. I'm just peeling their Bulbasaur skin off and rinsing them off of that sticky stuff, and also roughly chopping those to fit in the blender. And last but not least is a bunch of cilantro that I'm going to chop the stems off, saving most of the leaves for the garnish because the stems have the same flavor as the leaves and they're going to get blended up anyway. So stuffing all that into my blender with a preliminary amount of salt and black pepper. We're going to need a ton of this later when we're finishing, but just a little bit to start. Also a good handful, maybe a tablespoon of Mexican oregano because that flavor is important. And we need some liquid to help all this come together, so why not use some of the simmering chicken liquid that we have. We're going to be using that later anyway, so I'm just adding a few ladlefuls into the blender. Let that go on high for like 30 seconds to make sure everything is evenly processed. This left me with like 4 cups of salsa that we can use later. This is going to add all the fresh flavors that are signature to the pozole. Meanwhile, we can check back in on the chicken, which after almost an hour is pretty fork tender. Contrary to popular belief, this stuff can overcook in water. It would leave it nice and chalky if you left it in for too long. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all those chicken pieces onto a plate, and I'll carefully just use 2 forks to shred off all the meat that I can get off of them. There's lots of ligaments and tendons and other stuff that you don't want to eat, so just be sure to take that out as you're shredding it. I'm going to save all these bones because I'm not done with my stock yet. You could technically go to the serving step at this point, but I have to go to judo class, so I might as well make the stock a little richer. I'm going to put all the bones back into the pot and then keep simmering that until I need it. A couple hours later, I'm back home and the stock is smelling even better. Now I can remove the bones for good, and I'm just going to strain this for good measure. There's little bits of stuff that I would rather not eat at the bottom of this, and at first I was trying to strain this by hand, but just figured pouring this over a strainer into a bowl was easier. Okay, that's a really nice chicken stock that's ready to go. Side note, up to this point, this is just a really good chicken stock to have for general use. Now, before combining the salsa with the stock, I'm going to do a really important step here. There's virtually no Maillard reaction in this recipe, which kind of sucks, but that's just how this is. So to help with that, I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil into a pan and get it really hot to where it's smoking. And right as that happens, be really careful, but dump in your salsa. It's going to kick up and spatter everywhere because it's full of water mixing with hot oil, but this instant char on the sauce is a really good technique to get some flavor into it. That'll calm down pretty quickly and you can just stir it around, and I'm letting that go for like 10 to 15 minutes to get some deeper flavor on it. You can just keep it at a medium bubble. You don't need it to fully boil and you don't want it to just simmer and sit there. At that point, I'm pouring that into my hot stock and then mixing the two together. The final 2 main components are the shredded chicken that we made earlier, and then a couple of cans of hominy. This is just a corn product that's popular in Mexico. It's whole corn kernels that are soaked in an alkali mixture that softens them up. It's used in tons of different dishes in Mexican cuisine like this one. I'm draining 2 25-ounce cans of that and then dumping that into my pot as well. I'm going to give the chicken and the corn a good 15 to 30 minutes to warm through and get everything mixed together. And I'm finally going to taste for seasonings, and I know I'm going to need a lot of salt. Like I said, everything to this point is pretty unseasoned, so it needs a lot of salt to absorb. Just keep pinching and tasting until it starts tasting like something. You can also add more pepper and oregano as needed. Now the final fun part of this dish is all the toppings you can put on top. It promotes heterogeneity in each bite and makes this dish even fresher. So after spooning a good bit of the pozole into my bowl, I'm going to add some more diced onion on top as well as some chopped cilantro, then some diced ripe avocado, the most vital part in my opinion, don't skip it, some shredded iceberg lettuce for some fresh crunch, and some thinly sliced radish for color. Don't forget a lime wedge or 2, and this is your bowl of pozole. I also like to serve mine with some tortilla chips on the side just for some salty crunch, but this looks absolutely beautiful. It's very appealing to the eyes. It has lots of different deep and fresh flavors that we put together, and it's also really healthy. This is a good soup to have at any point in the year when you're trying to eat a little better. I think it's time to get to the taste test. So my throat and my voice are a little less than 100% right now, so this is actually the perfect dish for this time. Kind of a lot of components, and you have to buy a lot of fresh things to make this if you want to put all the toppings on top. But in the grand scheme of things, this is not really a difficult dish to make, or it doesn't take all day. Just a few hours of your time and you're rewarded with something that's really fresh and comforting and warming. And it's actually pretty healthy too, so this is perfect. Let me get a good bit of the soup with the chicken and hominy and everything. All right, provecho. Yeah, that's really clean and just what I was looking for on a day like today. There's not a lot of added fat to this whatsoever, so the avocado on top is a really nice touch and it completes everything. But this homemade chicken stock as the base of this soup is really the star here. It's the first time I've ever made a real chicken stock actually, and I can really tell the difference like everybody says you can. I would never turn down a salsa roja in a dish like this, but there's just something about the verde that I really like. Just the fresh chiles of the poblano and the jalapeño and all the cilantro and lettuce and everything, I just think it comes together perfectly. The real key here is salting this until it tastes like it should, which is a lot of salt. Everything in here that we put in was unseasoned, the chicken, the hominy, the salsa, so it really needs a lot of added salt because it's going to taste like nothing and you won't be able to enjoy your work. But you can make this when you want a lighter meal but still want to feel satiated. Still has all those beautiful Mexican flavors that you love eating Mexican food. Not the most well-known dish, especially here in the States, so I think it deserves more recognition. If you haven't tried this before, I think you'd really like it. But let me know what you think. If I did stuff wrong and you're Mexican, let me know. If me liking green over red is wrong, also let me know. But that's going to do it for me today. I really appreciate all of your support. Thank you guys for watching. Be blessed, and I'll see you next time. At least I've got my lunches figured out for the rest of the year.